I just want to firstly start by thanking everyone for being here because I really do appreciate how far people have travelled and given up the time because obviously this is a very important topic for everybody and especially the wider industry and infrastructure sector. I'll start by introducing myself. I am obviously from Electrical Media. I worked on Intelligent Data Centres magazine, which is one of our brands at the company for 6 years, where I did meet some of you along the way. So thank you so much for your participation and support. And yeah, I would now like to hand over to Sham. If you'd like to start to introduce yourself.
Yeah, first of all, I would like to thank everyone for giving me an opportunity for being here and to discuss and about all this, which is very crucial data about current problems. So my name is Sham. I'm a student from University of East London. So I'm currently working on this dissertation project, which is related to AI. So let's see how it goes. So I'm still learning. I'm exploring the major areas, still in the learning phase. So I hope I'll try my best to give the outcome that I'm going towards it. So
thank you, Sham. And Umaima.
So much. I'm the senior lecturer at the University of East London, and basically I also lead the MSc Cloud Computing program as well, and also the Cloud Computing module as well. Also, I promote women in tech in my department and across the university as well. And if I talk about my research area, more is on data centers sustainability, focusing on the IT aspect, like how could we make our servers, networking equipment, the storage equipment efficient. So I came into the academia, full-time academic 3 years ago. Before that, I was research assistant and I worked a couple of years in the industry as well, but all related to the data centers as well. So this is before that I had my normal academic qualifications, BSc, ME and PhD, and then I fell into the data center industry.
Thank you, Umaima. And Ben, please, could you introduce yourself?
Yeah, I'm Ben Cranham. I'm the Chief Operating Officer at Pulsant. And Pulsant is an infrastructure provider. We provide a platform called Platform Edge, which is a combination of a private cloud platform, a distributed network, and then we've got 14 data center locations up and down the country, from all the way up in Edinburgh, now down to Fareham. We just recently acquired 2 additional sites. So I've now got a new location in Birmingham and one in Fareham. So I'm looking forward to visiting those. But I've got a significant experience in terms of this conversation. I've got a team of about 200 people, of whom are just over 100 working in our data centres. So the data centre skills gap is a live issue for me.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. And Deborah.
Yeah, my background was originally product design. I'm a senior academic professor at London South Bank University. I've been there for many years, and so my career has evolved, but started in product design and then did a PhD, which involved life cycle assessment and sustainability, actually of electric and hybrid electric vehicles. But the great thing about working in LCA is that it applies to everything. So I was invited to take part in projects related to data center sustainability, starting about 2010, I think. And nobody had looked at the impact of hardware. It had on infrastructure. It had all been energy consumption. So we did PhD, and Beth Whitehead, the PhD researcher, she now works for, and you know her, don't you, Umaima? She's a sustainability consultant with a data center consultancy. So still worked in that field. And then I became increasingly aware that nothing was changing. There's still, everybody was thinking about energy. And in reaction to regulation and so forth, there were changes in energy consumption, but still there wasn't any concern or genuine consideration of the impact of hardware. So I set up a project and got funding for SEDASI, which was a circular economy for the data center industry, as a sort of demonstrator project. and it ran from 2018 to 2023. Through that, I actually met Umaima at various industry events. But what we wanted to do was to show that it's possible to be circular, and also the economic, environmental and social benefits of circular practice. So since the project concluded, I've continued doing bits and pieces of work and just chug along, really. And yeah. And the massive thing, of course, that really has, we thought we were doing well in terms of education for sustainability across the sector. And then AI came in and kicked off, and a lot of good practice has just fallen by the wayside. It's quite worrying.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Deborah. I'm handing back to you.
Yep, thank you. Matthew Underhill, Head of Infrastructure at Alfred H. Knight. We are a global TIC company, is what we're called. So we basically provide scientific analysis to the commodities industry. So not very sustainable in that respect. But we're looking to provide traceability and all that kind of stuff throughout the entire supply chain. So hopefully a little bit better. I maintain a very small data center of my own, and then 70 other offices with various levels of servers and things like that. I'm always learning. I think, you never say we're going to stop learning. I think we're always learning. I've chosen maybe a slightly different path to the academia side of things, gotten into it through apprenticeships and things like that. That's sort of where we are today, I guess.
Thank you. Thanks so much. Thanks everybody for introducing yourself. So obviously, as we're all aware, and hence why we're here, the skills gap is clearly a huge issue still for the data centre sector, and it doesn't seem to be kind of closing or slowing down, especially with AI driving the charge and also digitalisation. So we are here to address the possibilities of how to plug the gap and different perspectives, which I'm sure you're all going to offer in terms of how we do that. So I'd like to start by asking the key factors which you feel are contributing mostly to this current skills gap in the data centre and infrastructure space. And I'd like to start with you, Umaima, from an education perspective.
Thank you so much. I would say, there are current skill shortages, which I say, but from the industry perspective, like as you said that, you are still facing issues in terms of the acquiring the candidates from the data skills in the data centers. As I said, I also worked in the industry. When I was in the industry, I myself see there are lots of shortages and the people are struggling. But when I went to full-time academic, I would say there is no skill shortage from the academic eyes. If I talk about, I'll give you a couple of examples. Like I teach cloud computing module, in which I do teach a little bit about the data centers. Obviously, based on the current curriculum, I can't give all 12 weeks lectures on the data centers to them. So in January, we have 2 semesters that runs for the cloud computing. One is in January and one is in May. In January, we have 711 students. That is just for MSc students. And in this semester, which I'm currently running, we have 400 plus students. And you can say around 1,000 students per academic year. We bring the talent, but in that 80 to 90% of the students were unaware that how could they get into the data center industry. They don't know what is the career pathway, what is the exact pathway to get into the industry. So that's, as I said, in short, I would say there are lack of awareness. I won't agree that there is a skill shortage. That is, again, I repeat, it's from academic, from the industry eyes, not from the academic eyes. So one thing I say, it's lack of awareness. That is not a clear collaborations between the educational institutes and the industry. And the next, I would say, it's a little bit about the misconception or the misunderstanding what you say. It's that if you talk about the data centers, everybody's finds both you need the technical persons, you need the tech, you need the software engineer, you need the data analysis or something. But this is a diverse field. You don't need civil mechanical, not only from the staff, you need from the project management, finance, and every. As I was reading some of the reports, and it says that you need 200 plus different roles in this industry. So in conclusion, we have the talent. The way is that how we could bring that into the data centers.
Thank you, Umaima. Yeah, it's really interesting points, especially from that angle where you're kind of seeing that firsthand, especially with the students. Deborah, would you agree with Umaima?
Absolutely, and in fact, I've written down it's a very diverse sector. It's comprised of many different sort of subdisciplines, but I think the big challenge is that courses are always discrete. They tend to be quite traditional. You either do electrical and electronic engineering or mechanical engineering or whatever. There isn't a sort of interdisciplinary approach that in education that mirrors what goes on in the data center industry. That's a big problem. And also, one of the big challenges is, well, people don't know what data centers are, so we can talk about that in a bit.
Yeah.
But also, the sort of a bit of a bugbear of mine at the moment, there's a huge problem with in sort of pre-university education, schools and so forth. The curriculum was changed, so we have this sort of baccalaureate kind of system where traditional things like English, maths, etc. have high priority, and design and technology, the areas that would expose students to some of the skills that would be really necessary or relevant to work in the data center sector. Students are just not exposed to them, so they don't have an understanding, and they don't like getting their hands dirty because they're not used to it, in the way that kids used to. So it's a very, it's a systemic problem that needs addressing from sort of age 5, really.
Yeah, it's very interesting. And I wondered, how does that land with you hearing Deborah mention that people don't know what data centres are, you've been, in the operational side of the data centre?
I think that's absolutely right. I think data centres have been a bit victim of their own success in two ways. One is, we've really seen the kind of growth piece come up. We talk about like AI driving that and various things around digitalisation driving that growth. So the market is getting bigger. The other thing we've been very good at is kind of keeping data centres secret, right? And there's lots of good operational reasons why we don't have data centre open days, or we don't kind of necessarily highlight where those locations are. But that creates an issue. My CFO was taking some graduate analysts around one of our sites in Reading. One of the kind of bright young graduates said, so this is where the cloud is. And it was that kind of moment of kind of, and I think we were talking about it earlier, the apps and all that kind of stuff. The fact that we're on our phones and on our laptops, we don't see the infrastructure that's actually driving that. So I think that's part of the issue. I think I'd absolutely agree with what Umaima said earlier on in terms of there's plenty of really bright people who could really make a difference in our industry. We work really closely with some educational organisations in terms of both our graduate programme and for our apprentices, and we get great people and they stay and they start a really good career with us. But that's about working closely. I think we've also got this challenging kind of mid-career. We're not as good as we should be at transitioning people in mid-career into data centres. We do, there's a significant number of people who, for example, come out of the armed forces and work in data centres, but we don't do that in as deliberate a way as I think we could. There's lots of skills that people come out of industries that aren't growing like ours, and we just let those skills kind of die on the vine a little bit. And I think that's important. And then I think in terms of the sort of end of people's careers as they go later on, we always knew there was the issues, that famous Uptime Institute report about 50% of engineers are going to retire in the next 5 years. And then COVID came along, and actually a lot of them kind of decided, well, actually, I'll go a little bit early. I think we lost 300,000 people out of the UK workforce over the age of 50. So that made that problem kind of bigger. So I think we need to be much better and work in partnership with educational organisations so that both sides understand what will work and what will help that to happen. I think we absolutely need to be much clearer about what a data centre career is. We talk about sustainability. A lot of, you read the press, you think of data centres as not sustainable and so on. If you think actually the careers that people have in data centres driving sustainability and actually, doing something that's really valuable there, I don't think we do enough to talk about, as you said earlier, that range of careers that exist in data centres. So I think there's a lot of work to do.
I think it's a really interesting point that you make as well, which is something that's never I mean, in the 6 years that I worked on the data center magazine, I don't think I ever had a conversation with anybody about that, that private aspect, about keeping data centers so private. And that might be one of the biggest reasons as to why people don't know that there are careers. That's it's just never a conversation that I've had with anybody, and not really something that has dawned on me. But it's a very good point. And I mean, now it's kind of been like a catch-22, because obviously, especially when you go over to places like the Middle East, they are still so private over there, and especially all around the world, but still. And so you can't even usually have a conversation with a lot of people in the Middle East about a data center. It just won't really happen. So I mean, it's kind of like, how do you address that? How do you open up the realm of possibilities and opportunities within the space when there is that challenge of keeping the data safe and so on? Matthew, what would you say about the industry that you're in and the kind of roles that are available? Because I know, you're obviously in the infrastructure area, but what sort of things would you say in terms of opportunities that there are for students in that way?
For students, we have a lot of openings. Obviously, I work in the infrastructure space, but we have an entire IT department. Within my space, because we're a little bit smaller, we're looking for people who are a little bit more, cross-functional, shall we say, so not specifically focused on servers. We want people from everywhere. Up in Liverpool, it is a challenge, to be honest. A lot of people want to be down south. There's a lot more people down south on that side of things. What I've seen as well with apprenticeships or degree apprenticeships, we have a lot of people who want to get into data, want to get into coding, business analysis, but no one wants to get into switching or infrastructure in general. And so what I'm seeing from sort of many recruiting things is people are not really focused on what we're looking for in that respect. So infrastructure-wise, they're not sort of there. We get some decent graduates, to your point as well. We do get people who apply from the armed forces in that mid-career, and always looking for those kind of unique individuals, as I am. I don't, unfortunately, I can't hire everyone. But what I've seen, and I think really interesting sort of segue, is so my nephew 2 years ago, so picking his GCSEs, he wanted to do computer science and engineering. Sounds reasonable, right? So the school just said, no, you can't do computer science because of the timetable clash. There was no backwards and forwards. There was no, okay, what can we do? Could you do this? Could you do that? No, that's it, we're done. So it's history now, which is okay, but he's not interested in history. So how does he get that computer science? Well, maybe get an A level's fine. And I think you mentioned it, sort of they've changed the curriculum, right? So now it's computer science rather than say ICT, which was a bit broader. And so it's that whole pipeline. So by the time that I'm getting to someone who wants to do an apprenticeship or something, they've completely left behind sort of the more broader things, and they're now looking more at coding and that kind of thing. So I sort of miss out on all of those people. And I see it here, I see it overseas as well. So many people are very broad, which is great, but they're not particularly interested in focusing inside the data center or inside that kind of infrastructure space. More about data analysis, which is great, or business, that kind of thing.
Do you think that's kind of sparked by social media? There's a lot of the algorithm side of that and the data, and I think before social media was such a big thing, maybe people weren't so aware of their data and how it was being used and those sorts of things. Do you think that might be related?
Yeah, definitely. I think it's also advertising, right? Something that I was thinking about is the data center in and of itself is multiple specialities, shall we say. And so we actually have a marketing problem, I think, almost. We're not sort of saying, hey, guys, you want to be in the data center, and here's what you can do. Like, most of the time, so for example, if I work with NetApp, they're very focused on storage. But all that they care about is storage, so they're pushing, they have tons of graduates, they have tons of great stuff there, but that's fine. So NetApp's pushing their thing, and obviously you see it, Google's pushing their thing and all of that. But no one's sort of coming together, as far as I can see, and saying, here's the data center, let's start. I did a bit of research actually. There are sort of consortiums around data centers, but I'd never heard of them until I started researching, which is kind of interesting, given my sort of background. But so yeah, it's definitely a marking problem.
I think it is interesting to know how many jobs there are in data centers, because I've obviously seen various jobs when I've spoken to various people, but when you actually Google it, there are, just such a broad scope of possibilities within data centers, engineering, or, like data analysts, infrastructure, operational side of things. And I think, it's just kind of creating that awareness and ensuring people understand that, because I think even when you are in the data center sector, sometimes you don't even realize, especially with how fast the technology is changing, there are a lot of obviously AI jobs now around, and just kind of that pace at which it's evolving is kind of hard to understand sometimes, and therefore understand the different roles that are developing. I'd be interested to know, Sham, from your perspective, how you found getting into the data center industry and what actually sparked your interest in the beginning.
So honestly speaking, back in my home, so when I did my bachelor's, so I did in information technology. So we had this curriculum, so which really has a very little knowledge, like which they just push a small amount of knowledge about data centers and how the IT infrastructure management works. So that kind of subjects, with the help of that, I got some knowledge. So when I decided to do something, like to pursue something which I really want, I have to choose something really like computer science, so which provides a lot of pathways to different fields and everything. So when I ended up here, like from the University of East London, so they really like, for example, the cloud computing, so which I'm really interested in, to know how the cloud works. Even we used to have this networking as well as subject in bachelor's. So they always used to give some lab exercises, like how what's the system, what's the IP addressing, and something like that. So small knowledge, but still learning. So then later, when it's really becoming a big national issue, like a global issue about this, how the data centers are really trying to find some ways to design so that to mitigate those future impacts, like Deborah said before. So I think it's really a big problem for everyone to focus on, because everybody's like, in my perspective, students, they're like, when it comes to this, doing some project or something, which is really less, like that will completely rely on AI.
Yeah.
So AI, like whatever the small, for example, even when you open the Google, you can try to search the common, what's the weather or something, what is the synonyms or something. So even Google can give you something else, but most of the people there are just installing the apps, like the ChatGPT, they're completely relying on them and everything. But that really sparked, like, how can I do that? Because I really interested. So even I did this dissertation under Umaima supervision in this kind of fields. So then later when I'm trying to learn this deep dives into it, then I'm getting to know how big this issue is in context of, as a, companies, or like you people, like you said, we are not like sustainable friendly, but I know that we are really dealing with very critical problems. Even the senior, the few are more experienced, even they don't have, even though have some ideas, but it's really hard to deploy them because of this government or some other laws and everything, I guess.
And did you find that it was kind of an easy transition in terms of finding the opportunities that were out there and available to you within data centers, or is it something that you were passionate about and you kind of pursued that on your own accord?
No, it's completely like from the context of the studying. So when I'm trying to learn, so you'll find something which is interesting. So if you find something like when you're trying in the same path, you find something attractive, like curious. So I think I should focus more on this one. Maybe so in that kind of way, I was really into it. So I just approached even Umaima about this. She said, "Okay, let's try to do it."
Thank you. It's interesting, when I was doing some research, I found that several universities around the UK offer degrees that cover data centre technology opportunities, and especially under broader headings like cloud, edge computing, HPC and data analytics. However, they were only a very small handful of universities around the UK. And obviously this is quite concerning and also just quite sad because, as we've talked about, there are so many opportunities out there, and it's definitely something that needs our attention. So I wondered how we can better educate and attract young talent to the industry, especially in relation to what you just mentioned, and whether the government has a role to play. And I think that's the key element here. So I'd like to start with you on this one then, please.
I think we talked a bit earlier about the need to have a structured approach to bringing young people into the data center industry. And actually, when I look across the way that we've done it, and as I say, one of the things that is actually thought it was interesting talking about being based in Liverpool. One of the things that's actually quite fortunate for us is, because we've got 14 locations across the UK, we've got the opportunity to build relationships with kind of local educational institutions, and so to build those relationships where perhaps there isn't, you know, if I had a data center in Slough, I'd probably have, you know, more of a challenge in terms of kind of bringing people in. But in terms of where we are, we've been fortunate in that. But I think we also have been good at bringing people in who haven't got necessarily an educational background in data centers or even necessarily in IT. But it is about that thing of being clear to people what a career in data centers looks like. So beyond that first step, that first role, what are the possible paths and what are the possible opportunities? I'm pleased about the fact that actually data centers are now in the news about AI, because I think the last time that we were kind of headline news was crypto farms, right? Which is, you know, it was a horrific reputational thing for data center organizations. And, you know, clearly there were lots of those kind of set up as farms and adding nothing really to the sort of to the world other than, you know, a big electricity bill. So for me, the fact that people are starting to understand when they hear about data center growth that they understand where that is in terms of new technology, digitization and AI. I think that whole piece on again sustainability. I remember having a coffee with a client who was effectively ran operations for an airport, and I said, you know, it's quite challenging sometimes that we're doing things in our organisation with our people around sustainability and so on, and at the same time we know that, you know, we're having such an impact, and everything that we do, you know, I'm now having the conversations about balancing, you know, PUE with WUE, you know, water versus power, all of those kinds of things, and sort of whole life costs and so on. Those are things that I think young people are inspired by and are interested in, and if they can see that the career is in an organisation that's actually devoted to delivering digital transformation in the most efficient way possible and the most sustainable way possible, I think that's a conversation that we don't have enough of. I think in terms of the role that the government has to play, there are, you know, against the politics of it so much, but we've sort of made a decision as a country or as a government that we're going to focus on the UK workforce. You know, you look at other countries around the world who've not been embarrassed about importing talent into, you know, to develop their industries, but we've made a different decision as the UK and sort of moved away from free movement and so on. So we have to have a long-term plan. You know, we talked about there's such a resource available. So I think I was really pleased that we saw the 10-year industrial strategy in the last couple of days. You know, there is funding for a skills element to that, and I think if we can do, you know, there are examples. I know people talk about Malaysia and the way that they kind of reset their education, funded their education differently for those STEM subjects for engineering graduates to massively increase the number of engineers who were industry ready. And could get that education in a way that, you know, wasn't economically out of reach for people. That kind of long-term planning, as you say, you know, to be in a place where you say, oh, you can't take those two GCSEs because they clash on the timetable. Just just doesn't talk to what we need as a country to be able to meet that growth. So I think government does have a part to play, and it's a little bit about sort of backing up, talking about how much you want these high growth industries, you want well-paid jobs for people, is you kind of have to back that up in terms of how you set education up. That's my sense of it.
Definitely, and I think that some people do have the opinion that the school curriculum needs to be modernised, and that is a great example, because we need to kind of look at it as a future investment in the education system. Obviously, Ben mentioned sustainability, Deborah, and that's your forte, so I'm going to give the floor to you, and I'd like to know your opinion on this.
Yeah, but I mean, it's really hard. I think there are lots of challenges about, sort of trying to explain to people when you're looking at pictures of cats or, sharing videos, and I'm astonished at how many people do that on, just travelling on the train. The environmental impact of that is astronomical. And I know Professor Ravi Basharish at University of East London, he did some really interesting research looking at the impact of video sharing and so forth. But there's a complete sort of conceptual gap between, I'm doing this for, my friends, and then understanding where the data goes, how it's processed, etc. And somehow, I don't know what the magic solution is, but somehow we need to kind of bring those things together. And I think it has to start at a really young age, in school, sort of cause and effect. And it doesn't help when, the tech sector is sort of racing ahead, trying to make chips that perform 27 times faster than the previous generation, and they run hotter, which means you need more cooling, and they need more mineral resources, etc. We've got so many kind of contradictions. I think we need a much more holistic approach to it across education, really. There's nothing wrong with sharing videos, but understand what the implication is. And I think the one of the biggest challenges as well is the more we do things on screen, the more removed we become from, real impact of things. So this is anecdotal, but I run a project called Product Forensics. It's really simple. People have been doing it for years, but we do it in a very particular way, which focuses on sustainability. And we give students broken, I hasten to add, electrical and electronic goods that they have to disassemble, and they have to identify 6 materials and understand what the materials do, what the performance is, what the environmental impact is, are there ways that you could change the design, etc. Because, and I'm very old, so when I was a kid we used to take things to pieces and understand how things worked, and that just doesn't happen anymore. So you've got the school curriculum, the design and technology courses where children, younger students, are exposed to a whole array of different skill sets and subjects. It's not just design, it's how things work. The courses are being closed in lots of schools. There were, I think, 10 years ago, something like 11,000 D&T teachers in the UK. Now there are only 3,000. And the government really needs to support those courses and make sure that you can do, because actually computer science and engineering, they're not alien subjects. It's not like dressmaking and ceramics and computing, whatever. There's parity, isn't there? Yeah. The government needs to sort of plough money back into education at really low, from the beginning, to kind of get kids to understand the impact of how things are put together. If you press that button, why it's not magic. What happens? Why does it work? And the other big thing I've always had a bugbear about is the name, the cloud. Lots of people still think that something magical happens up in the stratosphere, and it's got nothing to do with the physical world. And again, it's that sort of distancing. It's sort of endemic distancing, doing everything on screen without handling and touching and experiencing things for yourself. So Yeah, I think we need to. It's a societal problem, really. As I said, I don't know what the answer is, but could certainly do with the solution could sort of start with the government investing in, giving kids the chance to do things that are real and physical rather than simply virtual. Yeah.
I went on a trip in relation to our data centre brand a couple of years ago to Croatia with a company, and they took us around their modular data centres, and it was really interesting. And that is the first time I was really excited to go, because that was the first time I'd ever seen a data centre.
Yeah.
I couldn't believe it in the whole 6 years or 5 years, however long I'd done that role at the time. But yeah, and they had made a data centre out of timber, and it was this whole sustainability effort. And I just thought, just to see those different developments, but also see how things are working, and actually see real people working on these data centres, it was quite mesmerising. And I actually had a few conversations there to say, why is this not a regular thing for schools? And and I think they did try and push that element of it, but I do think when people see things firsthand, they can relate to it. Then it's it makes
you remember physically the smell of things, the texture, whatever. Looking at things on screens, you've got no idea.
There becomes it kind of feels that distance between what's actually going on out there to actually seeing it firsthand. And I think it makes it.
And just sort of going back to your point about sustainability, I think I've been teaching for a long time, and students' attitudes have really changed towards sustainability. They're much more aware of the impact of what they do in many respects, but not as far as doing stuff online and say data centre and sorry, but right, well, we're going to our lab and we're going to have a look at some stuff and we're going to take it to bits, and things are very fragmented, but it's encouraging that kids, younger people are more concerned about sustainability. And you get big rough lads who you think they whiz down the chicken shop at lunchtime. They're sitting eating their nuts and their packed lunch from home. Things which that gives me hope. Yeah.
But I think I think there is a challenge. I mean, you were talking about that we need to focus on the preschools, pre-university guys. And I'll share one example, because I do a couple of ambassador roles as well with my features. I mean, that major aim is to demystify the young talent and bring them into the data center industry. So I just share one example. A couple of months ago, I went to our nearby school, that is secondary schools, and that is Airite, which is normally the age between 12 to 13-year-olds, boys and girls. And it was around 300 students where we delivered, and it gave them aware that how the internet works and how the data centers works. Initially, when normally I do this kind of activities, I ask them that, do you know what is data center? Not even a single student raised their hand, because as we said, we don't know what is a data center. It's there. But when I asked them, do you use YouTube? Do you use Netflix? Everybody raised their hands. Everybody had their smartphones and this thing. So, but when we finished the lecture, we got some very interesting questions as well, that what subjects we need to take to get into this industry, how many bulbs or how much money you will make out of what you are earning, and these kind of things. But when I talk to their tutors, I mean, they instantly comes to us and they says that we are really struggling, that we also want to teach them this as part of the GCSE. And if you see the computer science or ICT curriculum in GCSE, they do have the element of AI, but obviously they don't have anything about data centers or cloud or digital infrastructure, because as you said, that cloud resides in the data centers. But now we are one step ahead. AI infrastructure resides in the data centers as well. So they are saying that we are struggling to give them hands-on exposure, like to make our hands dirty, how the data center looks like. And if I come back to the university perspective as well, I do have links with industries, data center operators or something. Somehow I managed to take my students, but obviously due to security policies and everything, not all the operators allows more than 20 or 30 students. And as I mentioned, I have 700 students. Now you can imagine that what challenges we face in terms of this. Obviously government is making some regulations, they are giving fundings and they are doing apprenticeship, there are schemes and this thing. But still, the way the industry is growing, I mean, we need to think about something more about that. How could we make this more appealing or make this more awareness in the sector.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that is a key point, is how to make it more appealing.
Mhm.
Last year, obviously, as we're all probably aware, the UK government classified data centres as critical national infrastructure. Just on your point, Deborah, about people not knowing what a data centre is, and even still now, do you think that that helped in any way to kind of validate or verify data centres and the industry as a whole?
Yeah, I don't really know, but I think perhaps more people are aware of the such as sensationalist headlines about use of AI is going to take all our water in the UK, or those sort of rather exaggerated but still concerning points. I think people are more aware of that, but whether that they then join the dots between oh my God, that's really bad, and here's a data centre, actually it can do really good stuff too. I don't know. But I think the key thing is education, isn't it? It's, I don't know whether you noticed, Umaima, at university, if you're doing outreach events, very often young people will want to choose a career that they understand. They know what a doctor is. They know what a car mechanic or a hairdresser or a a chef is. But if you say a data center engineer, or even in some instances engineer, they really don't know. And then there's a challenge as well if parents, sort of perhaps push their children towards the professions that they understand as well. So somehow we need to demystify, well, it goes back, I suppose it's sort of encapsulating what everybody's been saying, the professions. How do we sort of make them accessible?
And it goes to the point you were making earlier about the kind of dissociation. When you go back 40, 50 years, when someone took something apart, they then understood how it worked. You took a clock apart, you looked at a car engine, now all you're seeing is the device that's receiving the information from something that's remote. And so, you could take a phone apart, but it's not going to make you want to work in a data centre necessarily. So it's absolutely about bringing that, bringing that really to life for young people, I think. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Matthew, what are your thoughts on this? Because going back to Deborah's point earlier, where she said, people don't understand how those two things marry up, where people are using their phones but then not understanding the impact, or they can't see the end result. Do you see much of that impact on the infrastructure working within that? Or is there a way that we can kind of get that out there and show how those two things marry together?
Very good question. I think there is definitely stuff that we can do. I think, as I was sort of talking about earlier, we need to market ourselves a little bit better. I was going back just one step backwards. You're talking about sort of consumption and phones and things. I think the internet and everything, it's all now productized, right? So we're not consuming the cloud, we're consuming Instagram or cat pictures that I send. All kinds of funny dog videos to all kinds of people. It's great. But that's how they're consuming it. And I think the other thing, which I think is very interesting, is if we're advertising on LinkedIn, we're too late. Is kind of where I see it, right? We need to get onto TikTok or Discord or Twitch and actually get there, get down to the younger people. I mean, I'm not that old, but I don't have any of those, so I don't know anything, particularly. But as I'm not on TikTok, but that's where everyone is, and I think that's how we can start to move forward. And I think having actual people, shall we say, like the likes of us, sort of advocating or being public within this, so that people can say, oh, that's what a head of infrastructure looks like, or operations in data center, or research, or any of that. That's what it looks like. This is how we get there. I understand that now. I think that's going to be key, because I don't think that there's many young people who are sitting there sort of saying, ooh, I want to work behind YouTube. Maybe they want to work, as an AI analyst or an AI person or coding, and that's where the industry is shifted to, right? Everything's gone to software. That's where all hey, let's write AI or let's do software or agentic or
cyber
all that
security,
cybersecurity.
yeah.
That's where it's really shifted to. That's what publicity is.
Yeah.
That's, you know, I mean, the number of people who said to me, oh, I want to do cybersecurity. Why do I do cybersecurity? Because it pays really well. Great. Okay.
I think that's something that people don't realise about data centres,
Exactly.
which is one of the things that I also came across. But why are organisations not pushing that forward? Because obviously we're in a cost of living crisis. People want to know that they're in a stable, good job. In data centres, it is constantly evolving. There is that future element, that career progression side of things, as well as it being paid well. So, you know, yeah, it's a really good point. I also wanted to mention with Pulsant, I think it's companies like Pulsant that are really doing well for this progression in terms of getting young people on board with the launch of the apprenticeship programme last year. So how do you see apprentices working alongside professionals that have been in the industry for years? Is there that sort of transition period, or what are the sort of key things that you take away from that?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's, you know, we talked about, or I talked about the fact that we, you know, from a demographic perspective, have, you know, quite a lot of our workforce who are, you know, in the second half of their career, if you like, and it's been really kind of refreshing and really positive to see actually how those teams have worked together and that kind of experience being passed on, and again the different perspectives of, you know, the kind of different generations in the workforce. Yeah, we haven't seen any kind of negative side of that. We've been fortunate, as I say, with the quality of the apprentices that we've brought into the organisation. We work with good academic organisations that support in terms of those individuals' development, and we've got a good talent organisation internally that does that. I think that's the important thing, is that you've got the structure in place, that people, you know, don't turn up as apprentices and they're just the person who's doing, you know, making the tea or whatever, right? So we've got a very structured approach to making sure the development is there, because, you know, somewhat selfishly, at the end of that period of time, we want them to join us and to build a career with us, right? It's really important for us to do that. So we invest a lot in it. And as I say, both in terms of our graduate scheme and our apprenticeship scheme, we've had, you know, really good success, and it's been very positive for us.
Does that reassure you for stepping into a role at data centres?
So I think, you know, as Matthew said before, like we should move into this, you know, much famous platforms to get awareness about this. I think in my perspective, in the youth kind of perspective, I think most of the people, or the, you know, youth, they're just completely distracted because of this unrelated, you know, content, or, you know, which is not related to technology. Most of the people, they're not even interested.
Yeah.
You know, they're like, they just want to go into this, you know, some memes or, you know, TikTok videos to get some, only they're like trendy technologies right now, because like the AI, fintech, and like software development, because which is booming. The youth is completely focusing on these things, because they know only these things. If you ask them, like, do you have some idea about what's behind the data center,
Yeah.
and how they actually work? Do you have any idea? But so far, I think even the universities are doing some initiatives, like, you know, in my cloud computing course, we have this, you know, AWS web services, so which they provide, you know, all these courses about how the data center works, how you can, you know, use this, you know, like EC2, all these services, and you know, how you can build, you know, architecture about a software or the behind. So I think from university kind of thing, I think they are trying the best, but the people, I think they are completely focusing on these, you know, which are more trendy technologies. I think that's I wanted to add, because they're less interested. They're only focusing more high-paid salary jobs, and I think in the olden days, like you said, like the people used to have this reality of the things, they feel it, but right now everything is like virtual, and they're missing that logic reality behind it. Like Deborah said, I think that's I wanted to add that. Thanks.
Thank you. So we must talk about the influence of AI, which is kind of unavoidable. But McKinsey research shows that global demand for data center capacity could almost triple by 2030, with about 70% of that demand coming from AI workloads. So I'm keen to know what the influence of AI is from each of your perspectives on labour needs and workforce planning. So Umaima, from an education perspective, how do you see this?
If I talk, there is a good, I would say it's a kind of coin. You have a pros and cons if you say both sides of the coins, right? If you think about the impact of AI, you need more AI technical specialists or something, as we say, then you will fell into the skill crisis issues, right? As we say, that there are, I was reading some of the reports that in UK only they required 59,000 engineers in certain fields to do the AI and automation kind of things. But obviously, if I say the other side of the coin, it's not all the functions can be automated in the data centers. For example, if you want to install the server, if you want to install the generators, and if you want to build the customer client or customer relationship management. So we do still need the people, no matter what the impact of AI is coming. We are increasing the capacity of the data centers. Whatever, I think the government also published some of the capacities. Obviously, there are debates going on, whatever the figures are published. I'm not going into that figure. But obviously, if you are increasing automations, you need the infrastructure, you need more data centers, you need more people based on to run that. You need technical people as well. And as I said, you need the other functions that we can't automate down.
Mm-hmm. Very true. And I think we hear a lot in the industry and in technology as a whole about how AI is a positive influence and it's benefiting the industry. But I'm quite keen to hear the other side of the coin as well. And I know that with the wider infrastructure industry, this is impacting roles in cabling, rack management, and cooling. Matthew, is this something that you're seeing in your particular sector?
Not at the moment, not yet. We're not that big, but I think when I was thinking about this question, something that came to my mind was AI is going to be doing some of those more mundane tasks, right? Well, machines, should we say. So how are people supposed to get into the data center if there is no longer an entry-level job? It's now a mid-level job. And I think that's maybe more the question from a data center perspective. How do we ensure, and great to hear that Pulsant have this fantastic apprenticeship program, because as I said, I was an apprentice one long time ago, and I was in a great company, but I think a lot of companies view apprentices as people who make the tea, and they don't actually put time into training them. And so if you're not self-starter, then you're probably going to go nowhere. And I think from that perspective, then we need to think about how to get AI savvy entry-level positions in the data center. And that's kind of, I don't have an answer for that, but as I've been thinking about it, that's kind of where I've arrived at with this whole transition period.
Yeah, I think there's been that increase in the demand for AI literate roles, and that's something that has become more of a focus. In terms of upskilling current employees, Ben, is that something that you're kind of doing at Pulsant, or is that a focus for you?
Yeah, I think to go back to kind of the conversation we were having a little bit earlier, in terms of understanding the data center industry, so Pulsant, we're a co-location business. We've got our cloud platform, our networks. We're not hyperscale, cloud data center organisation building these gigantic data centers that you kind of see the computer generated images of, but never seem to get built. But we've got those client relationships in our data centers, right? So again, that's something you need people for, and you need people skills for, and that's actually one of the things that, particularly for our kind of graduates and early career members of the team, developing those sorts of relationships and understanding the different requirements of different clients in the data center is actually kind of part of what makes the job, makes the job interesting. For us, we're seeing an increase in AI workloads and AI related use cases where the learning, the inference models are happening somewhere else, and then we've got technology providers who, are then bringing that to our regional data centre, so that we've got that kind of edge piece. So our organisation and our team overall needs to understand that language, as in the same way that we needed to understand the language about high density computing or digitization or any of those kind of things that have driven growth in our business before. But actually, for our organisation, understanding kind of client need and being able to address that and respond to that is the most important thing, and it's probably the most human thing about what we do. So for us, actually, that entry level piece won't go away, right? Being able to talk to clients and do things for clients in a specific way. I think AI and robots, thankfully, are like kind of a long way off being able to do that in a meaningful way.
Yeah, hopefully they are more of an enhancer and seen as that rather than a replacement.
Yeah.
Deborah, did you have any thoughts on AI and how it's impacting the development of the industry?
One of the things is, and I get started my depth with AI. We've got a PhD, a collaborative PhD with a sustainability consultancy in France. And the acronym for the project is ASME, which is Augmenting Sustainability Metrics through Use of Artificial Intelligence. So I'm dealing with the LCA bit, and other academics are supporting the student with the AI bit. So I'm running on the spot to understand what the student is doing, and it's hard. It's really hard because things are changing and there's a whole different language to learn as well. But and one of the things that this lad is going to do, we hope, once he's done, built all these models and frameworks and so forth, is to compare the impact of AI-based approach to a non-AI-based approach, and it, to be a valuable project, I think. But on another level, I mean, from my understanding of AI, it's great for identifying faults, monitoring, blah, 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 blah. But we're still going to need people, unless you've got modularly projects that are designed in a modular fashion. So a robot can come along, take out a server or whatever, and take out component X and simply pop a new one in, which isn't very sustainable necessarily. Then we're still going to need people to to manage all the different versions of kit that are in a standard data center. I think it'll be, but then you've got the problem, how on earth do we engage and get the young people to want to get their hands dirty and do that kind of task rather than coding and so forth. But I'd like to believe that AI is not going to be able to do everything, and we're still going to need hands-on, roles and so forth.
Exactly. Even to build the robot, we need a people.
Absolutely, absolutely. Yeah.
And then, what do you see from an operational side of things with AI? Like, how is that impacting data centers in that sense?
Yeah, I mean, we're seeing the ability to be able to report on things, to be able to model things. Those things we've definitely seen advantages of that in terms of the technology. But I add that to things like automation or computer-aided design or any of those things that kind of over the last 20-25 years have made things easier. You still have to put a lot of effort in at the front end to be able to get the benefit out of it. I think the fact that, as we kind of have all said, you are going to need people to continue to deliver those kinds of services is actually a benefit for us when we talk about how do you attract people into the industry, because there are industries that you can look at and go, in 10 years' time, I'm not sure that that's going to be there, right? Because, you can see how that kind of. But I think in terms of our infrastructure, that's not what we're looking at. One of the things that's where we've seen AI recently make a difference is when you're running critical national infrastructure now, or you're running critical services for clients, you want to be in a place where you've got resilience, you've got the kind of things that means that things don't go wrong very often, but you want your people to be well trained so that when things do go wrong, they know what to do.
Yeah.
So actually now using some AI modelling to be able to model those kind of scenarios and see how people respond to those scenarios is a really good way of being able to, test things. The ability to be able to do AI type peer reviewing on top of human peer reviewing, so you're getting kind of multipliers and multiple views and things. Those kind of things where you're using the tooling to add to the kind of security and the resilience of the services that you're providing. I think that's powerful and useful for data center organisations.
That's true. Yeah, I think that human element is hopefully going to always be required in many jobs. Recent telehouse research found that more than half of IT decision makers believe there's a lack of interest in the digital infrastructure sector as a career, which is obviously something we've talked about. But one reason could stem from the lack of diversity and inclusion within IT teams, with 63% of respondents highlighting it as a concerning issue. So that's kind of quite worrying in terms of that diversity element. I know that last year we did the Women in Data Centres Roundtable, and both of you were a part of that, which was really great. And I think it was amazing to get all of those different insights. And we did talk a lot about how the industry is quite dominated, male dominated, and also of a certain age group. So I don't know if anybody's kind of felt that within the data centre sector. It'd be quite interesting to see from kind of a male perspective, if maybe Matthew, you've kind of experienced this, and if this is something you think that can also still be improved.
Yeah, it's definitely still male dominated for sure. Within my own teams, we try to be as open as we possibly can be, but the unfortunate thing is that I tend to get 99% male CVs.
Yeah.
So my talent pool then is quite small. And I actively work, and honestly, I fight with HR about the wording of things, because that puts people off in what we're expecting. And we've had some women which have been fantastic. They've gotten too good for us in life. I think I have seen an increase, not specifically in my role in infrastructure, but within our general IT. We're seeing a lot of more women coming through in coding and sort of adjacent, like business analysis, coding, project management and things like that. Sort of more with an IT focus, which has been good. I think there's tons of improvement that can be done. I tell you, I go to all kinds of tech events, whether it's in Silicon Valley or Vegas or whatever, and it's so male dominated. As I talk to sort of my peers who are women, I feel, and maybe you can correct me if I'm wrong, they feel maybe a little bit intimidated by some of those, and they don't feel that they can be free because they've got to watch out for that guy who's 50 and has had too many drinks or whatever, and I think that's really sad. So I think we as men can and should be advocates and sort of partners in trying to improve that, because it's unacceptable, and I think that will help us to increase the talent pool, right? Suddenly we've got a whole new talent pool, but I think it also starts all the way back, right? STEM and all that kind of stuff. So how do we push that for a more diverse talent pool, I guess. I'm not quite sure, but I think it's just sort of speaking out, and it's great to see ladies here who are sort of being ambassadors, and I think we, at least let me talk for myself, I need to support you guys better, not for my voice, that in this respect doesn't matter, but to be there and sort of give you the platform, which I shouldn't be doing, by the way, but I think to a certain extent there is that, sort of adding those numbers.
No, but it's great to hear, I think, and it's something that we touched on last year. It's definitely something that I remember you mentioned, Deborah, in terms of the language, and so that's a really interesting point, because I think you can be an influence within the workforce to, impact that and have that positive
Yeah.
language use and that sort of thing. Amanda, have you seen a difference maybe since last year in the uptake of women that are interested in these sorts of subjects in the industry?
Yes, women are uptaking it. I mean, as the industry figures, you say that. I mean, it's less in the data center industry, we have less than 25% belongs to the women. And if you reach to the leadership role, it's less than 10% women. So I think women's perspective, I mean, they're a little bit misconception, as we said, it's a male-dominated industry, but obviously they need some kind of extra mentoring. It's not necessarily the mentoring should come from the female only, it should come from the male as well. Like I have been mentored by male, that's why when I in this industry. So I think, I mean, as Matthew said, as that if you go to the speaking events and this thing, we have very less percentage of women, but obviously we see a drastic change in the last couple of years, particularly after the COVID as well. So that, and if you, as you have been to Middle East and something, there are less percentages compared to over here as well. So we need to create a role models. It's not the men only talking about the females, they are very good or something. It's the females, like when I did with ambassadors or some things, we normally says that we are here because we are in this industry. So you as a girls can also be there. So, and coming back, touching upon your point in terms of the job description as well. So sometimes the job descriptions are so specific or something, women's or 30 to 40% of the cases, they drop it that we couldn't able to meet the criteria, but the men's they says, I meet at least 70% of the criteria, let's go and apply for it.
Yeah.
So, I mean, the things are changing, the women's are getting, but as I said, I mean, we need to be clear that data center is not does mean that you need to be on site 24/7. There are lots of flexibilities that the operators can offer there. They still can manage their childcare duties and every other things they want to do. It's not only the job of the female, it can be the male can take care of the childcare responsibilities. So the things are changing as I've been in this industry from the last 10 years almost. So I've seen when I entered the industry, there are hardly this, but if I see in last couple of years, we see the women's are coming, but still we need as per the figures we see in the industry.
Yeah, I know that one of the key takeaways from that discussion last year as well was about the paternity leave and how obviously women are granted maternity leave, but men aren't in equal measure. And I think that was something that the women on the panel were quite keen to have their voices heard about, because that is something that often wouldn't cross a lot of organisations' mind, I'd imagine, and for men to have that equal, opportunity with their children and things, that's something that should be implemented from the top and carried down into those organisations. So yeah, that was something that kind of stood out from that discussion really. So moving on, just to kind of focus on the future now as we kind of bring the discussion to a close, I wanted to talk about strategies to overcome the skills shortage. Obviously that's not going to be done at the click of a finger, but to build a skilled talent pipeline, there obviously needs to be things that we kind of implement into the strategy and the workforce planning and the business model. So from the kind of, education level, do you have any opinions on how this can be implemented into workplace practices to build that skilled talent pipeline for the future?
I think maybe if you consider these kind of campaigns like, awareness campaigns from the industry side, so then even the industry should have some backup from the government, because even sometimes there is funding or sometimes, all these kind of things. So when they have a bigger backup and bigger support, they're always in to do such campaigns to get awareness and all these things. Even some students might step up and they might get to know everything.
Yeah.
So that maybe I should hop into this sector. Maybe I should know more.
Yeah.
That's kind of thing.
Thank you.
Yes.
And obviously we talked about upskilling, and I think that's something that is mentioned quite often as well, as upskilling from other industries and other sectors, and bringing that talent in from other places, but also upskilling within the workforce as well. And something else that I noticed when doing some research was kind of widening that talent pool and not just sticking within, I know you mentioned earlier about the UK and that's kind of a big focus, but to kind of expand that talent pool with other regions and countries and industries again. Did you have any thoughts on that then?
Yeah, I mean, I think I would be pleased to have the broadest pool, right? We kind of got to operate in the way that the country's kind of now set up. I think the diversity piece and being very conscious about keeping that on the agenda is really important. I'm really pleased that in our latest intake of apprentices, 5 apprentices, 2 are female, right? And that, when we last did our graduate recruitment, we had 1 female graduate who's now moved into a full-time role in the organisation. So being conscious around that and making sure that we aren't doing even things like uniforms and stuff like that, making sure that the way that our organisation is set up when we bring people into the organisation that's supported. We've done a lot of work over the last couple of years around neurodiversity in our workforce, and brought in some really kind of inspiring people to talk to the organisation. And actually, when you deal with something like neurodiversity as a kind of conscious decision, actually it becomes an opportunity for you, because people feel much more comfortable at work for able to be themselves. If you ignore it, it can create challenges, right? And so I think being thoughtful, not just about making sure that you get the right people to apply for a role and the right or a broader set of candidates to apply for the role and then join the organisation, but that you make the organisation work for that broad group of talent that you're bringing in. And I think again the piece that we talked about earlier, not just focusing that at the start of people's career, but doing the work to attract people and support people and upskill people in their mid-career is important. So I think, go back to what we sort of said at the beginning, there are lots of very capable people out there, and there are lots of people who would want to do the work that we do. We have to raise awareness, we have to talk about what we do in data centres, and the broad kind of sweep of what that industry is, and the different roles that are in play there, and stop just kind of poaching from the existing talent pool, right? Which is part of what drives the issue. It's very easy to get an engineer from over there, but actually investing in making a difference. And yes, great if you get government support, but actually as an organisation, making the decision that investment is a good investment, and that's why we're very happy to have people who've been with us a long time and have kind of worked their way up from apprentices. We've got people in senior management roles who have worked their way up in our organisation from apprenticeships, and that's a good way to grow talent.
Yeah. One thing to note that I did come across was to also include kind of use cases of people that have been at the company, whether they have started from the bottom or they are now in a high position, but to kind of have those examples of people that have been a success or are enjoying work, and especially those 5 girls or women that you kind of took on. I think to have those examples and those people giving their first-hand opinions would really help to benefit the wider industry and obviously the organisation. I think obviously we've touched on the diversity, but also that kind of inclusion element as well, and it's kind of in terms of that retention. I think that's something that people are really struggling with as well. It's to retain the staff once they've been employed by the company and they've gained the skills, and I think that work-life balance and that inclusion element are really key. So that kind of flexibility around the workplace, and especially outside of the workplace as well, is so important. And one other thing that I thought was interesting was school and university visits. I'm not sure if you kind of see many people from the data centre sector coming into universities, but that's something that maybe could help.
Yeah, because one of the things I have this idea that we've got data centre industry expanding, wanting to build new sites in the UK, etc. Hopefully they're going to pay tax. Well, we don't know, but I think there could be levies so that they pay into a sort of futures fund, and they build some educational sites. If they don't want external people to visit their actual sites, then we have, say, 4 or 5 data centres, educational centres around the UK that are set up specifically for projects, schools and university projects, and you know, give young people a real experience, and not only young people, they could be, you know, career change people, an actual experience. What's it like there? And it could be driven by the government, but funded in part by the companies that are making a hell of a lot of money. You know, give something back. And it's going to be an investment for them anyway, because hopefully it'll encourage more younger people, and they'll understand what goes on and also see how they could fit in and develop a career. And the other thing that I guess, because you have apprenticeships, Umaima, we notice a lot of school students would much prefer to do an apprenticeship than to do, you know, to study full time, because they're being paid and learning. And I think a lot of young people are very frightened about, you know, paying £9,000 a year fee and living costs on top. So there's huge scope for apprenticeships in the sector, but it's just, you know, that initial get people through the door, show them what goes on, you know, working on a project for a week with some people, electrical engineers and some management and ops people, and you know, some coders, and just some kind of collaborative experience for a week.
I think it is that awareness piece, isn't it? You've kind of got to create that awareness to then for people to then understand what opportunities there. But then there's also secondary to that has got to be that kind of entry level support into the industry and to show people how to transition from the education level. Is that something that you think people are aware of, or there needs to be more support?
I completely agree with Deborah that when she mentioned of the apprenticeships program, I mean, apprenticeship always, sometimes they are funded by the operators or sometimes by the government schemes or something, but we have other elements as well that we have I don't know, in your university you have that we have courses with placement as well. So like an MC placement, it's one of the examples over here. So once you do all your modules, you complete your dissertations. After that, you have 7 to 8 months to do your placement, and that is what the student pay by themselves, around 3,000 or 4,000 in additional in their fees. This is what not the operators have to do. That they only have to bring it to their data center operation sites or whatever it is to train them, to net them down. It's just free of cost, unless if they want to do some pocket money kind of thing. So, but it's not only about the money. It's as I said at the beginning, we are struggling to get connections with operators. So in 7 to 8 months, the student can be 5 days a week with you full time, because they are not doing any courses, and that there is kind of to get the internships, to get the hands-on exposures and other. Your idea, I like it, Deborah. I mean, if you are building any sites, just go and approach nearby universities, nearby schools. There might be some students, they are willing to get hands-on. If not, you can go to the universities as well. You can give them awareness, kind of a guest lecture and these kind of things, so that student can have the idea about this. So I mean, this is not only about we are thinking that if we have the fund, if the industry is funding as well, but we still have the talent who can come on the volunteer basis as well. You can get the idea of the students in 7, 8 months while they do the placement, and then it's up to you whether you want to keep it or not, but at least they get the experience about it.
And I think as well, we mustn't forget about the current employees and the investment in those current employees in terms of career growth opportunities and, you know, support in those sort of flexibility elements that we mentioned previously. I hope everybody's had a fair share of their opinions and you feel like you've had an opportunity to speak, but if anybody's got any passing thoughts, I would welcome them.
I think one of the really good things is that we come from quite different backgrounds, but there's a real consensus of thought.
I thought the sustainability element was a really interesting point, because that's something that I thought about over the last few days when preparing for this, was because sustainability and that innovation side of things are really popular amongst younger people now. So that in itself, you'd think, would be an attractive element of data centers, because that's something that is such a huge focus for data centers, as you know, for the wider industry. So I thought that was a really good point. Did you have anything that you wanted to add?
Maybe I can add something about the placements. So because a lot of these international students, they're coming to gain some knowledge. But when it comes to placement, they completely think that they are assured that we will get some placement. Like they're completely thinking that placement is like, getting a position in a job, like in any company, to get a role. But it's not about that. It can be apprenticeship, it can be internship, it can be something that is really hands-on experience to learn. I think that can be an example for placement. I think a lot of the students are misconception, like, placement. I think this is like a job, it's like a pay.
Yeah.
So it's I think once you're done with the MC masters, I think this is the time because there are the options for the universities, like you can go off placement or on placement. So if you have the placement, you have to pay the upfront money so that to get some hands-on experience or something. Because when the opportunities are, because the students, they're really struggling even because of the lack of interest and because of the, to be honest, I think that's the most priority, I think, so because lack of interest and, they're literally misconception, everything. Because everything, like, it's really getting difficult for them, even though they're not interested to know something which is really amazing or which is really great. Missing that.
It's a great way to look at it. Yeah, thank you so much for being here and giving your opinion, because I'm sure everybody's benefited from that as well. So thank you. Thanks so much again to everyone.